In the bustling heart of the Loop Diner in Chicago, young Marcus, a ragged black boy with hollow eyes of endless hunger, pushed the door open and stammered to the weary waiter David. "Please, sir, just a piece of bread?" David's hand froze as he served a drink, his face softening with a pain that mirrored Marcus's unspoken loss, before he nodded and placed down a full plate, igniting a cautious spark of hope in the boy's chest that threatened to shatter his guarded heart. If this story has already moved you, subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Marcus pushed through the door of the Loop Diner in the bustling heart of Chicago, the bell jingling above his dirty, tangled head. His eyes, dark and empty, like the cold streets of Michigan Avenue where he wandered, locked onto the waiter behind the counter. David, a middle-aged man with deep wrinkles marking years of exhausting shifts, was wiping a coffee cup when he heard the trembling voice of the boy. "Please, sir, just a piece of bread?" The air smelled of fried bacon and fresh coffee, contrasting with the stench of garbage clinging to Marcus's torn clothes. He was a black boy of about 12, skinny as a twig, his dark skin marked by dirt and cuts from nights spent sleeping in alleys near Millennium Park. His torn sneakers squeaked on the sticky floor as he approached, his heart pounding in his chest. I don't have any money, but I can clean something in exchange," he added, his voice nearly a whisper, fearing being thrown out as so many times before. David froze, the damp cloth in his hand suspended midair. His gray eyes, tired of witnessing the indifference of the big city, met Marcus's. Something stirred in him, a distant, painful memory of his own childhood on the streets of Detroit. Before escaping to Chicago in search of a better life, he didn't just see a beggar, he saw a reflection of himself, young and broken. Without a word, David motioned to a stool at the counter. "Sit there, kid. You don't need to clean anything today." Marcus hesitated, his body tense like a rope about to snap. He had learned not to trust strangers. The empty promises of cops in Grant Park, the cold stares of passers-by on State Street, but hunger gnawed at his stomach like a wild animal, and the smell of hot food pulled him like a magnet. He sat down, his hands trembling as he watched David disappear into the noisy kitchen where dishes clattered and orders echoed. Minutes dragged like hours. Marcus looked around. Families laughing at nearby tables, a couple sharing milkshakes, a lonely man reading the Chicago Tribune. He felt like an intruder, a ghost among the crowd. What if David called the police? What if this was a trap? Tension built in his chest, a mixture of fragile hope and deep fear, making his fingernails dig into the wooden counter. David returned with a steaming plate. Not just bread, but scrambled eggs, crispy bacon, golden toast, and a cup of hot chocolate. "Eat slowly or you'll get sick," he said, his voice hoarse but kind, setting the plate before Marcus. The boy's eyes widened, tears threatening to fall. No one had ever done this for him, not since his mother abandoned him years ago, leaving him alone on Chicago's ruthless streets. As Marcus devoured the food, bite after bite, David watched discreetly, wiping the counter but lost in thought. Why this boy? Why now? He felt an inexplicable connection, a curiosity about the story behind those frightened eyes. Marcus, for his part, ate voraciously, but each bite carried a doubt. What would come after? Would this kindness have a price? The diner buzzed around them, customers coming and going, the sound of distant sirens on the street. Marcus wiped his mouth on his sleeve, his stomach full for the first time in days, though his heart was still tight. David approached again, leaning over the counter. "What's your name, kid?" he asked, his voice low, avoiding curious ears. "Marcus," he replied, hesitant, looking down. "I live, well, on the streets near Navy Pier." David nodded, a shadow of sadness crossing his face. He thought of his own life, the lonely apartment in Wrigleyville, the empty nights after his divorce, the loss that haunted him. "I'm David, and you don't have to go back there tonight if you don't want to." The words hung in the air, creating palpable tension. Marcus looked up, surprised, his heart racing. What did that mean? A genuine offer of help or something else? Curiosity burned in him, mixed with fear of being vulnerable. David, seeing the hesitation, smiled faintly. "Stay until the end of my shift. Maybe I could use a hand in the kitchen." As the afternoon sun filtered through the diner's foggy windows, Marcus nodded slowly, a spark of hope lighting in his chest. But doubt lingered. Why did this man care? What was he hiding behind that kindness? David went back to work, serving customers with his usual efficiency, but his mind drifted to Marcus. He remembered the hard days in Detroit, stealing food to survive, swearing that if he ever had the chance, he would help someone like he once was. Now here was the opportunity, but with it came repressed emotions, guilt, regret, an old pain he had buried deep. Marcus, sitting on the stool, watched the movement. A group of tourists laughing, a hurried delivery man. He felt exposed, as if everyone knew of his misery. Every laugh seemed like mockery, every glance, judgment. The emotional tension grew. He wanted to flee, to return to the familiarity of the streets, but the diner's warmth and the promise of more kept him there. Hours passed. David's shift neared its end, the diner slowly emptying. Marcus helped stack plates, his small hands working carefully. David praised him, a simple good job that made the boy blush. For the first time, Marcus felt a glimpse of pride, but his curiosity about David deepened. Why was he so kind? At nightfall, as Chicago's lights flickered on outside, David locked the diner. "Come with me, Marcus. My apartment isn't far, in Lincoln Park. You can stay on the couch for a night." David locked the door of the Loop Diner, the click echoing along the empty stretch of Michigan Avenue at dusk. He turned to Marcus, who waited on the sidewalk with his hands shoved into torn pockets. "Come on, kid. My apartment's just a few blocks away in Lincoln Park. It's not fancy, but it's warm and dry." Marcus followed, hesitant steps echoing on the damp asphalt. Chicago's cold wind whipped his face, carrying scents of hot dogs from street vendors and car exhaust. He eyed David warily, the tall man, shoulders bent with fatigue, carrying a bag of leftovers from the diner. Why was he doing this? Distrust gnawed at Marcus like his earlier hunger, but the memory of the hot meal pushed him forward. They reached the modest building in Lincoln Park. David climbed the creaking stairs, Marcus close behind, heart racing. The apartment was small, a living room with a worn-out couch, a tiny kitchen, and piles of old Chicago Sun-Times newspapers. "Sit," David said, pointing to the couch. "I'll heat something up." Marcus sat on the edge, body rigid, eyes scanning, framed photos on the wall. David younger, standing beside a smiling woman and a black boy about 10, at a picnic in Grant Park. Who were they? Curiosity pricked at him, mingled with fear. David returned with hot soup and bread. "Eat, and tell me about yourself." As he ate, Marcus murmured fragments. A drug-addicted mother who left him at 8, nights in shelters near Union Station, days begging on State Street. David listened, nodding, his eyes distant. "I understand more than you think," he said softly. "I grew up in Detroit, an alcoholic father, a mother working 2 jobs. I ran away at 15, came to Chicago, worked diners like the Loop for years." Marcus looked up, surprised. A layer of vulnerability revealed itself in David. He wasn't just a waiter. He was someone who knew the pain of the streets. "Why are you helping me?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling, emotional tension rising like a wave. David hesitated, glancing at the photo on the wall. "I lost a lot in life. My son, he's been gone for years. A car accident on Lakeshore Drive. He was like you, black, full of potential. But the world is cruel." Tears glistened in David's eyes, but he blinked them away. "Seeing you today reminded me of him. Maybe I can make things right this time." Marcus felt a tightness in his chest, empathy tangled with hesitation. He had never had a father, never a figure like this. But trust? Curiosity about David's past grew, laced with suspense. What if this changed everything? David cleared his throat. "Tomorrow, come back to the diner after school, or whatever you do. I can give you simple work, washing dishes, cleaning tables. I'll pay you cash and meals. What do you say?" Marcus froze, spoon halted midair. A real offer? He thought of the cold streets, the coming winter, the dangers near Navy Pier. But what if it was a trap? Emotional tension pulsed. His heart split between hope and fear. I'll take it," he finally said, his voice weak but determined. David smiled, the first genuine one of the night. "Good. Now, get some sleep. The couch is yours." That night, Marcus lay on the couch, blankets smelling faintly of old lavender. City sounds filtered in, sirens, distant laughter. He heard David in the bedroom turning pages of a book, perhaps a Bible, from the worn cover. Shared vulnerability created invisible bonds, but Marcus wondered, what else was David hiding? The next day, Marcus arrived at the diner at noon, after wandering through Millennium Park. David spotted him through the window, waving. "Come through the kitchen," he called. Marcus obeyed, the smell of frying filling the air. The kitchen was chaotic. Cooks shouting orders, pans bubbling. David introduced him. "This is Marcus, he's helping today." He handed him an apron. "Start with these dishes." Marcus plunged his hands into hot water, foam rising, feeling a new sense of purpose. David worked nearby, sharing tips. "Hold it like this so it won't break." Hours flowed swiftly. Marcus cleaned. David shared light stories about quirky diner customers, like the man who ordered decaf coffee on Rush Street. Laughter echoed, building empathy. But pauses revealed depth. David mentioned the divorce after losing his son, the loneliness in Chicago. Marcus shared little by little. Dreams of playing basketball at the United Center, fears of gangs on the South Side. David listened. "You've got potential, kid, don't let the streets swallow you." At the end of the shift, David paid Marcus $20. "Good job, come back tomorrow." Marcus took the money, his fingers trembling, his first honest earnings. Gratitude grew, but so did curiosity. Why did David see redemption in him? Days turned into routine. Marcus helping at the diner, dinners at the apartment, deep conversations. David taught him basic reading with old newspapers, sharing life lessons. Vulnerability deepened. Marcus admitted nightmares of abandonment. David confessed guilt over his son's death. One night, heavy rain pounding Chicago, they sat in the living room. David picked up the photo. "This was my boy, Jamal. He loved the Cubs, like me." Marcus touched the photo, heart tightening. Marcus accepted the unspoken invitation to stay, his life subtly changing. Days became weeks in the steady rhythm of the Loop Diner. Marcus arrived early, apron tied, throwing himself into tasks with new determination. David guided him patiently. "Hold the knife like this to chop onions without tears," he said in the noisy kitchen, steam rising like mist over Lake Michigan. Marcus washed dishes, cleaned tables, and gradually began serving simple orders, pouring coffees during the morning rush, when Loop executives hurriedly ordered eggs and toast. David watched from afar, subtle pride in his eyes, though underlined with sadness like the gray clouds over the city's skyline. "You learn fast, kid," he praised, patting Marcus's shoulder, a touch that made the boy tense at first, then slowly relax, trust built layer by layer. At the Lincoln Park apartment, routine solidified. Marcus slept on the couch, now with extra pillows David had bought at a store on Clark Street. Dinners became moments of sharing. David cooked simple pasta, and they ate at the small table. "What if you send me away?" Marcus asked one night, his voice low as rain battered the window, reminding him of lonely nights in the shelter near Union Station. David paused, eyes meeting Marcus's. "I won't. You're welcome here as long as you want. I know what it feels like to be alone. After losing my son, my wife left. Chicago became an empty place for me." Marcus touched the photo on the wall, features resembling his own reflection in the bathroom's foggy mirror. "He looks like me," he murmured, heart tightening with an inexplicable connection. David nodded. "Jamal was smart like you. Loved reading about the Bears at Soldier Field. I used to take him to games when I could." He pulled out an old sports book, teaching Marcus to read simple paragraphs. "Here, spell it slowly." Marcus leaned in, fingers tracing words, a subtle father-son bond forming, encouraging touches, laughter over mistakes, moments that touched the heart with human purity. But Marcus's inner fears persisted. On sleepless nights, he dreamed of his mother leaving him on the cold street of Wabash Avenue, waking sweaty, crying softly. David would hear, entering the living room with a glass of water. "Hey, it's okay. I'm here." He sat beside him, hand on his shoulder, sharing his own pain. "I blame myself for the accident. I was working a double shift at the diner, didn't pick him up from school. A car on Lakeshore Drive, and he was gone." These confessions deepened their bond, Marcus feeling for the first time real support. He began helping more at home, washing dishes, tidying the living room, gestures that made David smile. "You're changing things here, Marcus, making me feel alive again." Marcus's curiosity grew. He found an old box in the closet full of toys and children's clothes. Jamal's belongings. "Can I see?" he asked, hesitant. David allowed it, eyes wet. "Of course. He'd want you to use them." Marcus picked up a worn basketball, imagining games in the park. Emotional tension pulsed, fear of loss mixed with hope of belonging. Weeks later, on a sunny Sunday, they went to Grant Park. David carried a picnic basket, just like in the photo. "Let's play," he said, tossing the ball. Marcus dribbled clumsily on the grass, laughter echoing. For the first time, he felt safe. At the diner, customers noticed the change. Marcus more confident, smiling as he took orders. A regular customer, a professor from the University of Chicago, praised, "Good boy you've got there, David." David blushed, paternal pride shining. Yet inside, he wrestled with memories. Seeing Jamal and Marcus, a chance for redemption. One night after the shift, sitting on the couch watching TV, the Chicago weather report, Marcus turned. "Thank you for everything. I feel like I have a family now." David swallowed hard, hugging him for the first time, tears streaming. "You do, kid. You do." A rainy night in Chicago with thunder rumbling over the skyline, David and Marcus sat at the table in the Lincoln Park apartment, steam from hot tea rising between them. David picked up the framed photo of Jamal, fingers trembling slightly, and placed it in the center. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his hoarse voice breaking the silence, as heavy as the humid air outside. Marcus lifted his eyes from the sports book he was reading, a gift from David about the Cubs at Wrigley Field. His heart sped up. He could feel the tension in the air, a palpable emotion that made him clench his hands beneath the table. "What?" he asked softly, curiosity mixed with the fear that this revelation might shatter the fragile bond they had built. David took a deep breath, eyes fixed on the photo. "My son, Jamal, he wasn't just any boy. He was adopted, black like you, rescued from the streets of Detroit when I was young and foolish. I raised him with my wife, but after the accident on Lakeshore Drive, I lost him. Guilt consumed me. I abandoned him emotionally before I lost him physically." Tears streamed down David's face the first time Marcus had seen him cry openly. Marcus felt a lump in his throat. He leaned forward, touching the photo. "Why tell me now?" The emotional tension grew, the room seeming smaller, the walls echoing with unspoken confessions. "Because you remind me so much of him," David continued, his voice trembling. "Not just in looks, but in strength. Seeing you fighting on the streets of Michigan Avenue, it gave me a second chance. I see redemption in helping you, Marcus. Not to replace Jamal, but to honor what I failed to be, a father." Those words lingered, stirring a wave of emotions in Marcus. He thought of his own loss, his mother gone, cold nights at Navy Pier, and felt a deep, vulnerable connection. "I never had a father," he murmured, tears welling up. "You're like one to me now." David reached out, and they embraced for minutes. The following days intensified this transformation. At the Loop Diner, David taught Marcus not just tasks but life lessons. "Read this," he'd say, handing him Chicago Tribune articles about perseverance. Marcus devoured them, eyes shining, his curiosity about the world growing. "I want to go to school," he confessed one afternoon, wiping tables as customers left. David nodded proudly. "I'll arrange that. There are programs on the South Side, near Hyde Park. You deserve an education." He enrolled him in community night classes, paying out of his own pocket, transforming Marcus's life with emotional support. But deeper revelations came in quiet moments. One night, leafing through Jamal's memory box, Marcus found an old letter. "To my son, wherever you are." He read it aloud, his voice faltering. David listened from the kitchen, entering with moist eyes. "I wrote that after my wife left me. Jamal was everything, but I lost him." Hugs became routine. After a bad day at school, Marcus would cry on David's shoulder, feeling safe for the first time. "I love you like a son," David whispered, tears mingling, touching anyone who witnessed the profound bond formed through adversity. At the diner, co-workers noticed. "David's different, more alive," the cook remarked. Marcus thrived, helping efficiently though inwardly battling fears. What if David changed his mind? Marcus attended community classes near Hyde Park, reading books about American history, dreaming of a future beyond the streets. "I want to be a teacher," he confided one night, as they ate homemade burgers, city lights flickering through the window. David smiled, paternal pride glowing, though his eyes hid a secret, sparking subconscious curiosity in Marcus. Their routine was touching. Mornings walking to the diner along Michigan Avenue, afternoons studying on the couch, nights sharing stories. David taught him to cook, stir like this for the perfect sauce, and Marcus repaid him with spontaneous hugs, human bonds deepening, turning pain into hope. But on a rainy day, David pulled an old letter from the drawer, his hands trembling. "Marcus, sit down. There's something I've been hiding." Marcus obeyed, heart pounding in his chest. David took a deep breath. "Years ago in Detroit, I had a biological son. One night, crushed by poverty, I left him at a church thinking it would be better for him. But I never stopped looking. My Jamal came later, but the first one was you." Marcus froze, eyes wide, processing. "Me? Your son?" Tears fell, fragmented memories connecting. His mother's mentions of a distant father, her flight from Detroit before abandoning him in Chicago. "Why?" he whispered, his voice breaking. David wept openly. "I was too young, too scared. After losing Jamal, I saw you at the diner and I knew. The eyes, the name your mother chose. I confirmed it with old shelter records from Union Station." He showed the letter. Secret DNA results. Old photos. The embrace came. Fierce. Sobs echoing. Father and son reunited. Lives redefined. "I love you, Dad," Marcus said, the word dad striking deep. David replied, "And I'll never let you go again." If this story touched your heart, subscribe so you don't miss more moving stories like this. Stay tuned now for another emotional journey.